Hi, welcome to part 3. So this part, so we already gone over how the stick of Joseph had already in the wilderness, and the flood already came, and then through Titus, serpent trying to go after the children down here. Destruction of the temple. That's when the seeds began. Destruction of the temple. It's just more of a detailed version here. So during these 5 months right here. All right. So from April to August 31st. All right. So 24 hours before that, stick of Judah had already fled. All right, and their first day in the wilderness was April 11th, 80-70. We added 1260 days to Revelation 12:6, and that's how we get to our last day, September 22nd, 80-73. So, yeah, and the lawless one, Eleazar, also fled at that time. He had to. Couldn't have fled any later, otherwise he'd been killed. So he went to the Masada instead, and he took over there. So he took over the temple here, the temple along here, and then he took over to Masada. This guy was a power control freak. So, yeah, so I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I encourage you to look at the timeline and see how this all pieces together. So this was the cream of the crop. This is when the two become one stick. You had the stick of Judah and stick of Joseph, and they became one stick right here, as mentioned in Ezekiel chapter 37. And yeah, the land of Jacob, of Petra. Yep, Ezekiel 37:25, and that's where they would have ended up. So, see here. Yeah, this is actually an article put together by Future, but he did a pretty good job, though, actually. If you get to put that aside, but he makes the case that would have been Petra. He recognized Petra, but he's not seeing that was the fulfillment in the first century of a lot of passages. So yeah, this would have been a time we're fulfilling the law of Moses, and I think the best way to describe it, if you go to my video, it gives us a kind of a foretaste where it said, what else was the sign of Jonah? Not what you think. If you look for that video and watch that, where I basically give you the resources where I tie it to Jonah and the story of Jonah and so forth. And so this would have been a time where we had the flood over here, all right? We had the flood over here. The stick of Judah have fled, April 10th, 80-70 here. All right. We already had the flood back here toward the end of stick of Joseph, if you will. And then the end of one stick, the tree of life. So at the very end. And Revelation 2:7. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit said to the churches. To him who overcomes, I will grant to eat the tree of life, which is in the paradise of God. All right. So that was there. All right. So this period here, it had been, now Petra it's rocky, dry, and they're both probably destroyed due to flood. Gee, now what do we do? God would have provided based on the book of Jonah. It ends, well, you have the plant comforting Jonah, and then the next day it withers. And so that's a foreshadow of what I believe during this time, that special time, from the law of Moses, it would have been paradise full of plant life, beautiful plants to comfort them and feed them. All right, no more eating fish by Peter, feeding them based on John 21. Yeah, so they're just 40 years earlier, they're sharing the gospel. Now they're living out to the max. They're sharing the love of Christ to the max in the final 1260 days. And so then toward the very end, that's when the judgment of 12 tribes of Israel and the last Yom Teruah, which is day 5 out of 10, which you get the time times and half a time. Okay, so we have The Yom Teruah, which is a 10-day feast, went from September 18th to September 27th. Day 5 out of 10 at the half a time. That's September 22nd, AD 73. All right. So that's how we get that date there. But I had that date before I even did that. That's based on the works of Josephus. When backtracking all the way back to here. All right. So how they transform from the physical to the spiritual, meet the Lord in the air. They're shouting the Lord. The Lord just destroyed their last enemy. The Lord provided them all this. Their plant life. Basically, it's just a consummation of the entire Bible. All the stories put together, the beautifulness of repenting, the ramifications of that, the awesome. So they were experiencing the kingdom of God to the max, I believe. So when it came time to the last day of the last Yom Teruah, it had been such an amazing time that in my theory, in detail, how that would have happened, they would have been just drawn up and their physical flesh was just disintegrated. It just it was the regeneration that took place, and they were with the Lord forever from there. So, and then just like the book of Jonah, where the tree is alive or the plant is alive and it withers next day, same thing with the tree of life. It would just wither the next day, and as of September 23rd, AD 73, they're left desolate, just like Matthew 23:38. And no signs anything happened. No trace of anything. Remember, this is when the perfect came. Alrighty. This is when their knowledge ceased, done away with. There's no more, I don't know if that's the correct translation there, but there's no more writing that went on. No more, all pens were down. So there's no trace of anything happening here. And so how do I know these things happen? It's based on putting together a framework, tying with Josephus, and it all backchecks beautifully. There's been rumors that Josephus made some stuff up, and no, he could have not known, based on the date he gave here, that it was going to match up with the time times half a time with the Yom Teruah, when we add the 1260 days of Revelation 12:6, and we add the 1335 days at the end of 12:12. He would have not known that. Okay, that he's not God. Alrighty, so that theory is thrown out the door. All right, he did not just make stuff up so we have something to go by to make this all work. All right, so anyway, yeah, so that's their gathering. So the stick of Joseph on this side, they've been preparing so that in the stick of Judah fled the temple, they had a place already prepared for them, based on John 14:2, Jesus said. And then they've been paradise here. They've been sharing the love of Christ to the max, and they fulfilled the law of Moses at the last Yom Teruah on September 22nd, AD 73. All right. So there's a lot of parts and pieces to do this. This is a 50,000 piece jigsaw puzzle. That's why we need to use drawing software to piece this together. And I encourage scholars to start doing that. Just start doing it, piece it together. And anybody really, I'm not a scholar, but I pieced it together, and I end up going further ahead than the scholars. Oops. So anyway, alrighty. Well, anyway, I'll leave you at that. So thank you for watching the video, and hopefully now you can see Pella was just not the area they would have gathered in. Yes, I don't deny that there are people that gathered there or that fled to there, but that was not the gathering that they would have had in mind. When you look at the logistics and their history, the scriptures, the Old Testament scriptures on Petra. Yeah. So anyway, I'll leave it at that. So thank you very much, and you have an awesome day.